Okay, let's dive into this. He was literally never supposed to matter. Seriously, think about that for a second. We're talking about a child born outside of marriage, totally denied a formal education, and outright barred from most respected professions of his time, just because of a label he was slapped with at birth. And yet here we are, 500 years later, and we're still completely mesmerized by his mind. So in this explainer, we're unpacking the unbelievable story of Leonardo da Vinci. You know, the boy nobody wanted to educate, who basically ended up educating the entire world.
Picture this. It's 1452. In a tiny Tuscan town called Vinci, a baby is born to an unmarried peasant woman, Caterina, and a notary named Piero. Now, in 15th century Italy, that single fact, it should have entirely erased Leonardo's future right then and there. Illegitimate sons couldn't attend university. They couldn't easily join respected guilds. Socially and legally, he was at a monumental disadvantage before he even took his first breath. But against literally all of those odds, his reality became something completely different. He became a master artist, a futuristic engineer, and a wildly visionary scientist.
Well, because he was locked out of those traditional halls of learning, Leonardo just had to adapt. And adapting meant he honed this absolutely incredible superpower, the intense, almost obsessive observation of the world around him. Even as a young kid, he was noticing things that ordinary people just walked right past. He wasn't sitting in a stuffy classroom. Instead, he was outside, completely immersing himself and teaching himself the language of nature.
While other boys from privileged backgrounds were stuck inside cramming Latin verbs, Leonardo was out there mastering these incredibly specific, intricate details. He was studying the exact precise way water curls around a rock in a stream. He was watching how a bird's wing physically bends mid-flight to catch the air. He was soaking in the subtle, changing gradients of light from dawn to dusk. This wasn't just him daydreaming, right? This was raw data collection. This was his true education.
Surpassing the Master, the Florence Apprenticeship.
Jump forward to when he's 14 years old. His father sends him to Florence. It was supposed to be a modest, practical career path for a boy with no formal pedigree, apprenticing under Andrea del Verrocchio, who happened to be one of the most respected artists in all of Italy. And this brilliantly illustrates just how intense and multidisciplinary the curriculum in that busy workshop actually was. Step 1, mixing pigments for painting. Step 2, casting heavy bronze for sculptures. Step 3, getting his hands dirty actually dissecting anatomy to understand the human form. Step 4, calculating complex mathematical perspective. Nobody in that bustling workshop had any clue they were currently training the man who would redefine human potential.
And then we get this legendary moment that supposedly changed everything. Verrocchio was painting a piece called The Baptism of Christ, and he hands young Leonardo a very small task: just paint a single angel down in the corner. Well, the story goes that when Leonardo finished, Verrocchio looked at his own masterwork right next to his young apprentice's angel, and he just put down his brush for good. Supposedly, he never painted again. Now, whether that's 100% true or just a fantastic myth, it proved one thing to Florence for sure: a truly unusual, once-in-a-generation talent had arrived.
A mind 5 centuries ahead, the obsession with understanding.
But here is where the story gets really fascinating, because painting, it was almost just a side project for him. His real hunger, his ultimate obsession, was to understand literally everything. 7,000. That is the staggering estimated number of pages he filled in his notebooks, as he relentlessly studied things like the beat of the human heart, the structure of the eye, and the actual mechanics of flight. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how he wrote those notes. He actually wrote these pages backward, in a mirror script, meaning most people couldn't easily read them without physically holding them up to a looking glass.
Let's just rapid fire through the sheer scale of the foresight found in those 7,000 pages. He sketched a flying machine centuries before the Wright brothers were even a thought. He designed a rudimentary armored vehicle that essentially looks like an early tank. He drew out concepts for a parachute. His detailed anatomical drawings of the human body were so unbelievably accurate that they weren't surpassed in the medical field for another 300 years. And his studies of water flow, they literally anticipated modern fluid dynamics. He didn't build these things for fame, you know. Most were never shown publicly during his life. He was just undeniably compelled to understand the mechanics of reality.
Actually, let's hit pause here for a quick second, because we really have to humanize this genius. His biggest flaw? He rarely finished anything. Historians estimate that most of his projects, including his famous paintings, were left totally incomplete. And it wasn't from laziness. It was because his relentless, burning curiosity constantly pulled him away toward the next big question before he had even finished nailing down the last answer. The man who gave us iconic history struggled massively with follow-through.
The Unfinished Masterpieces, Redefining Art.
Yet, despite his major struggle with completion and his habit of abandoning lucrative commissions, he somehow managed to produce two of the most recognized artworks on the face of the earth. When he painted The Last Supper on a monastery wall in Milan, he didn't just bend the rules, he completely broke the mold. While traditional art of that era featured very stiff, posed, and static figures, Leonardo's work captured a frozen second of pure, unadulterated chaos. He gave us raw human reaction. When Christ drops the news of his betrayal, Leonardo paints 12 entirely different emotional responses, all firing off at once: shock, denial, guilt, confusion. It was absolutely revolutionary.
And then we're faced with this huge question. Why is a portrait of a Florentine merchant's wife the most famous painting in history? By all accounts, it should have been an entirely forgettable run-of-the-mill commission. Yet, the Mona Lisa became immortal. So why?
Well, the answer begins with technique. Leonardo pioneered a method called sfumato. So the crucial point is how this technique actually works. He blended colors and tones so incredibly softly together that there were absolutely zero harsh outlines. By completely eliminating the hard edges that other artists traditionally relied on, he gave the Mona Lisa this almost lifelike, breathing quality. When you look at it, it doesn't just look like paint on wood. It feels like a real, living person trapped inside a frame.
But come on, it's also the smile. Slightly there, slightly not. It literally seems to change depending on the exact angle you view it from. Even today, art historians and modern neuroscientists are actively debating exactly why our human brains process that specific smile the way we do. It was so perfect, yet so elusive that Leonardo carried this painting around with him for the rest of his entire life, endlessly refining it and never ever considering it finished.
A legacy of curiosity. The final years.
In his final chapter, Leonardo was invited to France by King Francis I. The king admired his mind so deeply that he gave him a residence near the royal chateau and reportedly visited him all the time just to sit and talk. Leonardo da Vinci passed away in France in 1519, in his 60s, supposedly right there in the arms of the king. He wasn't a king himself, he wasn't a military general, but his 15th century breakthroughs are still dominating our modern world. To put it in perspective, the Mona Lisa requires bulletproof glass at the Louvre to protect it from the millions who visit. His anatomical sketches are so brilliantly engineered that NASA engineers have literally referenced them. His painting techniques are actively debated by modern neuroscientists. This illegitimate son from a tiny town set an entirely new baseline for what a single human mind could achieve.
He left us with this incredibly powerful thought. I have been impressed with the urgency of doing. Knowing is not enough. We must apply. From the moment he was born, Leonardo was told he didn't belong in the rooms of the powerful and the formally educated. So, what did he do? He just built rooms of his own, in science, in art, and in the human imagination. And the truly amazing thing is, we're all still walking through those exact same rooms over 500 years later.
Which leaves me with one final provocative question for you to chew on. Was Leonardo da Vinci the ultimate, undisputed Renaissance genius? Or is some of his legacy an overhyped myth built on a bunch of unfinished ideas? I really want to know what you think about this, so drop your thoughts in the comments below. And hey, if you enjoyed this explainer, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss our upcoming deep dives into history's greatest minds. Let us know who we should cover next.